Good evening, everyone. Deputy Mayor Gary Kozovich in the chair tonight. The Mayor's away for a short break and will be back at next week's Ordinary Council meeting. I hereby declare the agenda briefing forum of the 22nd of April 2025 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:34. I welcome councillors, staff, there's no media, and members of the community. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the area. We recognise their cultural connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco and their continuing contribution to our city. We pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Elected members attending in person, myself, Deputy Mayor Gary Kozovich, Councillor De Vries, Councillor Jones, Councillor Johnson. Sorry, Councillor Johnson's on Zoom, my apologies. Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Burns, Councillor Powell and Councillor White. Executive leadership in attendance, Acting Chief Executive Officer James Hamley, Acting Director of Technical Services, Chris Rogers on Zoom, Director of Corporate Services, Emma Wollaston to my right, Director of Business Improvement, Lynette Solomons to my left, Acting Director of Development Services, Flu Kuljees to my right. There are no apologies other than the Mayor, and the Mayor is on leave of absence as previously mentioned. Are there any disclosures of interest? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, I, Penny O'Connor, wish to declare an interest in agenda item C3, the proposal to include 17 places on the heritage list to be considered today, 22nd of April. It's an impartiality interest pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is the following properties of my neighbours who I know socially are included in the list. Those properties are 19 Coolgardie Street and the properties at 85, 83, 81, 79 and 77 Heytesbury Road.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor White.
Oh, now I can. Okay. Sorry, sorry, presiding member. I'm quite a bit short. I think I might be in the same predicament. So let me declare that interest, and I'll have to sort of work out the numbers if I can.
Thank you, Councillor White. We can catch up with that next week and you can declare it then at the Ordinary Council meeting. Thank you very much. There are no announcements from me. We move on to the officer reports, and the first agenda item is C1, which is a draft amended local planning policy 1.1, residential development, low and medium density, which is on page 2 of the agenda. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor. Look, there was a lot of local input, a lot of local effort, and a lot of staff input into these local planning policies. Now, reading the attachments, there's a lot of red through them, a lot of deletions, a lot of track changes. So Are these changes going to fundamentally change those local planning policies?
Acting Director of Development Services.
Thank you. And through you, Presiding Member, I'll just refer to Acting Manager of Planning.
Thank you, and through you, Presiding Member. Thanks for the question. That's a really good question. And yes, there have been a lot of changes in Draft Local Planning Policy 1.1. Those changes are largely due to the introduction of the medium density code into the residential design code from the WIPC. And they don't materially change the intent or application of the local planning policy. So there are a lot of changes, but we really try to keep the provisions pretty much the same as they currently are.
So just a follow-up question, does that mean that the precincts, sub-precincts, all that sort of stuff remain as they were?
Thank you, and through your Presiding Member, the precincts and sub-precincts largely remain the same. We made some very minor changes where previously there were some small areas, like usually single lots or a few lots together that had an R50 density. They were included in sub-precinct 1, which is generally low density. We're proposing to so we're proposing to move those into sub-precinct 4, where they're better located. So sub-precinct 4 are the areas that have increased in density as part of LPS 5, and most of the areas are adjacent to existing low-density areas. So that would allow us to address the interface between the medium density and the lower density better through that change.
Just one follow-up question with that. So then how will the people residents who are going to be affected, or the properties are going to be affected, will they be informed about the changes, and how will they be informed?
Thank you, and through you, Presiding Member, we will advertise the proposal is to advertise the draft local planning policy for a minimum of 21 days, and that's the normal advertising through notices in the Subi scene, in the Post newspaper, and through the city's social media channels. There's no intention currently to specifically inform those community members that contributed, mostly because the provisions aren't changing as such.
Are there any further questions? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Presiding Member. I had a question about the document that shows the precincts, which is provided in the attachments as Appendix 1, which I think is a change, that it becomes an appendix. And reading through the amended local planning policy, I found it difficult to understand the relationship between that precinct map and the sub-precincts, because the sub-precincts are within LPP1, and this applies to both of the LPPs, but the precinct map isn't actually referenced. And bearing in mind that precinct map has with it information about the character of those precincts, I just wanted some clarification about how that information can be used in actually making determinations and decisions about development applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Acting Manager Planning Services.
Yeah, so the precincts are essentially a leftover from the old precinct policies. So under Town Planning Scheme number 4, we had a number of precinct policies, and they included the provisions for residential development within each precinct. When LPS 5 was gazetted in February 2020, we reviewed the precinct policies. We found that, and as Councillor Powell mentioned earlier, we worked with the community on the local planning policies, and we found that the policies could work better and be more outcome-based if we, rather than focus on a precinct, which is quite a large area within the city, we focused more on the local area. So instead of using precincts, we went the path of having the sub-precincts, which are sub-precincts 1 and 2 are the areas that have a special character that's intended to remain. Sub-precinct 3 is more just development as per the R codes without special character. Sub-precinct 4 are the higher density areas and the areas that have increased in density and especially the areas that are at the interface of high and low density. So we went out the path of having sub-precincts rather than precincts. The precincts were retained as a reference because the community was so familiar with using those precinct terms. Everyone knows in Subiaco where the Triangle precinct is or the West Subiaco precinct or Shenton Park. So we retained those for the purposes of description of the character. And we had some debate whether to take them out of the policies completely or whether to leave them in. And we decided to leave them in mainly because there might be some benefit in referencing some of the character descriptions within precinct if it comes to like a design principle assessment under the R codes or the objectives. So there might be some ways of referencing some of the character, like the specific characteristics within each precinct. So that's why they've been retained, but they don't really have a practical implication or basis for day-to-day development assessment. This is really now, these policies are based on each sub-precinct.
Just a follow-up question then. If the appendix isn't mentioned in the LPP, can it actually be used?
Acting Manager, Planning Services.
I might have to take that question on notice.
Thank you for that. We can catch up with that next week or during the week. Thank you. Are there any more questions for C1? Right, moving right along to C2, which is the draft amended local planning policy 1.2, residential development, high density, which is on page 8 of the published paper. Are there any questions from members? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, I have the same question about this one as I had with the last one in terms of the precinct attachment. So I'm happy to take that question on notice.
Okay, then that question is taken on notice. Thank you, Councillor Connor. Are there any further questions? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, my questions are the same as well because it's virtually the same planning policy. It's whether there are any fundamental changes from what has been our local planning policy, whether these amendments or changes are going to make any fundamental change.
Acting Manager, Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. Yeah, the answer is the same as before, even simpler. The main change to LPP 1.2 is really to remove the reference to medium density apartments because that has now been moved out of R Codes Volume 2 and into R Codes Volume 1. So the main change is simply an administrative change to remove those references from LPP 1.2 and include them into LPP 1.1. So no changes to the intent or application of the local planning policy.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for C2? Right, we'll move right along to C3. That is the proposal to include 17 places on the heritage list, which is on page 12. Are there any questions, members? Councillor De Vries.
Through you, presiding member, this would be a question for the acting manager for development services, just relating to 3 houses which there's questions around whether the owners are happy to have them on the heritage list. One of them is 83 Heytesbury, the other is 81, and apparently there is a question about number 77 Heytesbury, whether it has been built in the last 5 years. So I just want some clarification about what potentially is an issue for one of the residents that they wish to develop the back of their property, that's 83 Heytesbury, in line with the original build. It's not visible from the road. It's not going to impact on the streetscape. Is there any reason why that couldn't be removed from this heritage listing and at some subsequent date be added to it? Because obviously there's been improvements made to the property over a number of years that make it more authentic to its original design. What would the consequence of that be? And the other one would be that 81, which I think also the owners are not keen for it to be on that heritage list. And is it also correct that 77 is only 5 years old? Thank you.
Acting Manager Planning Services.
Yes, thanks for the question, and through you, presiding member. With regards to 81 and 83 Heytesbury Road, they have both been identified as having heritage value. And it is the process in the city's local planning policy to refer this to council for the decision whether to list it on the city's heritage list. So with regards to development, if a property is on the heritage list, that doesn't prevent development from occurring. We have a local planning policy that guides how that development can occur. And there are incentives available to owners of heritage protected places, such as a free consultation with a heritage advisor through the city's Heritage Advisory Service. So that's independent heritage architects that provide advice on how development can occur to be sympathetic to the to preserve the heritage fabric. Generally, and this has been subsequently amended in the place records, I think it's for 83 in particular, that the outbuildings or the additions out at the back are not contributory. So there's absolutely no issue with someone demolishing those and replacing them with a modern addition that's designed in keeping with the heritage character of the property. In terms of, I think the second part of your question was what the implications would be for not listing the property. That means the two places wouldn't have any heritage protection and they could be demolished without the need to obtain development approval. So that's obviously not something that's in accordance with the officer recommendations, because the places do have heritage value. Your question regarding number 77, this one is 77 is part of the group of 5. So I'm not familiar with the details of each of the assessments. If you do want some further information, I will have to get back to you and take that on notice.
Yes, follow-up question, Councillor De Vries?
Yeah, so from my previous experience through you, presiding member, on council, when we've discussed heritage listed properties, this idea of faux heritage has been really something that there's been strong objection to. Can the owners be given any reassurance that should they wish to do very much in keeping with the original home, using original materials and, you know, creating a beautiful extension that is compatible and much more livable for the whole family, the young family need more room. Can there be, you know, pretty definitive reassurance that they could do it in keeping with the original design when they have made it abundantly clear that's what they wish to do and spend the additional money? So in effect, you know, a probably more expensive build, is it possible for those owners to be given some reassurance prior to this coming to council? Thank you.
Acting Manager, Development Services, do you want to try to respond to that? Thank you.
Yeah, so the issue with, I guess, faux heritage is that under the Borough Charter, the intent is that new fabric is meant to be discernible as such. So as long as you can actually see that the new additions are in fact new and not old, there's some scope to consider what may be appropriate. And yes, I mentioned before, the city's Heritage Advisory Service would be available and each application would be assessed on its merits. So without actually seeing any plans, there's no way to give an absolute guarantee, but all developments are considered on their merits, and yeah, that would be considered. In terms of giving assurances, yeah, not sure how you would do that in a way that is actually in some way comforting to the owners. Yeah, I mean, there's until the plans are actually in front of the city and being assessed, it's very difficult to give absolute assurances that something would or wouldn't be supported.
Sorry, through you, presiding member, just have one final question with regards to the materials. Is it more that it's the materials that are used, or is it the design? What are the key things that matter in terms of you know, the owner's consideration? So is it that they shouldn't use original materials, or is it that they shouldn't use something that's compatible to the original design? Thank you.
Jutta?
Thanks, and through you, presiding member. Yeah, so it would be, I guess it would be the design rather than the materials. There's no issue with using traditional materials. It's really how those materials are being used in the building design, and yeah, as long as there's some way of discerning whether it's a part of the old heritage fabric or whether it's new, then that's generally what we're looking for. So if someone wants to use original weatherboards that have been repurposed from an existing similar building, that's totally fine. Yeah, as long as there's some way of telling that it's not a replica. So yeah, we don't want to end up with a replica. But yeah, it can be offset in some way to the original fabric, or, you know, like separated by a small part of a brick wall, for example, or some way to tell that it's not part of the heritage fabric.
Sorry to pursue this, but one final question. I thought the last one was, but through you again. So it could be discerning that it's a much more sustainable development. So the original home, like mine, you know, it's very old, very creaky. It's got lots of cracks in it. So if I built a new one, it would not have cracks in it. So that would make it discerning that it was not a faux heritage. Well, mine's not even a heritage, but it would also be air conditioned differently and have, you know, be sustainable, use, you know, different types of. So internally, even if it wasn't visible to the visible eye, could that also be considered to be, you know, not a replica in that sense?
Jutta?
Through you, presiding member, I think that's a little bit too technical for me to answer at this point. So yeah, we'll have to take that on notice and we get a response to you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your great work there tonight. Councillor Burns, C3.
Thank you, yes. Just as you see fit, presiding member, these, from my understanding, all of the application, all these developments that we were talking about in those lines of questions would be failing 5 objections that all had discernible town planning issues would be captured by delegated authority. Am I correct?
Acting Manager Development Services.
Thanks, and through you, presiding member. So these are this is a proposal to heritage list 17 places. They're not development applications. So we received 5 objections in total. Not. Okay.
Please do.
Thanks. It was just on the presumption that we're past it, and these, the item is carried. I'm just discussing that when we're talking about planning applications in the future, as Councillor De Veres was talking about, that these fall under delegated authority for the staff to consider the applications unless any application in the future on a particular property had 5 objections to the application, and all 5 objections were under town planning grounds, not just I don't like it objections. That was the nature of my question. I'm just talking about delegated authority and where these fall into them in a heritage sense.
Thank you. Acting Manager at Planning, are you in a position to answer that, please?
Thanks, and through you, presiding member. Yeah, my understanding is that that would be correct. I'm not 100% sure on the exact delegations that would apply, but generally, yeah, I believe that this would be able to be determined under delegated authority unless we receive 5 or more objections.
Thank you. And Councillor Burns, you're satisfied? Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Yes, and through you, Deputy Mayor. Look, a number of the objections are also based on the fact that people, residents, some of the residents do not want asbestos on their property. You know, they'd like to get rid of it and change it to something else. And isn't that quite a reasonable proposal, especially on health grounds, that they should be allowed to try and rid their property of asbestos without any real restriction on it?
Acting Manager Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, yeah, the removal of asbestos would be considered just normal maintenance, and yeah, would be able to be undertaken.
From my reading of the concerns lodged by a number of the residents, they were concerned that the regulations, that the rules would not allow them to freely remove that asbestos. You know, that was one of their key concerns. You know, that they want to replace it with something different. And I suppose that's the basis of the question. Isn't that a fair, you know, concern, and how can that be addressed?
Acting Manager Planning Services, would you want to take that on notice?
I can answer that through your presiding member. So I think what those objections are referring to is asbestos lean-tos that have been constructed at a later date. And they're specifically not included in the heritage assessment, or they're rather assessed as not having any heritage value, so they can be removed and replaced with a different extension or addition, as I was mentioning earlier, as long as it's in keeping with and sympathetic with the heritage character, then that would be supported.
Thank you. If there's no Councillor O'Connor, Councillor White, I think you tried to get in, but I'll come back to you, Councillor O'Connor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I just ask about the public comment process? And it looks like, as I read the report, of the 17 proposed, based on comments, there's been no change of view of the staff in relation to the 17 going through. I'm just wondering, what would you expect to get from public, from an objection when that goes to public for public comment, which might lead to a change of a recommendation? Is it because, I guess I'll keep it simple to start with.
Thank you. Acting Manager of Planning Services.
Thanks, and through you, Presiding Member, I would have to take that one on notice, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, sorry, can I?
Another question?
Yeah, a couple.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose one of the issues that I feel like we might contend with this, and I'd just be interested in the staff opinion about this, is 17 is a big number to get through in one whole motion for us to agree on. It's interesting to me that most of them have passed without any comment from anybody, and there are four properties in which people have raised concerns. So I guess I'm wondering, was there any rationale for doing 17 all at once? I realise there could be amendments and alternatives put that could change that, but I'm just wondering if there's a rationale behind this for the staff to be doing it this way. And I would just also add to that, I guess, because I'd be interested in the staff comment if I can do it this way, is that, some of these houses that have raised concerns are houses that have clearly invested in the heritage of their properties. Then they're clearly not anti-heritage. And it just seems to be maybe it's a matter of more of the ones who have raised concerns that, that to have everything lumped into the 17, maybe this could be dealt with in a different way. That's a question, I guess.
Acting Manager, Planning Services.
I can try to answer that through you, Presiding Member. So this has really come about as part of the past couple of years' work that's been done on especially the review of the local heritage survey, which, as most of you probably know, was first done for the Triangle Precinct and then for West Subiaco. And then as part of the review of the Subiaco Activity Centre plan, we undertook a heritage survey of places there just to make sure we're capturing anything before we go too far with the review of the Subiaco Activity Centre plan. So it's really just come to the point where, those places that have been given a level 2 heritage significance, which our local planning policy, I think it's 3.2, requires us to bring to council for consideration. So that's it's really just something that's that we had the officer time to get that together now and bring before the council. So there was no intention to specifically include 17 or more or less. It's really just a matter of timing that it's just been possible to do that.
Thank you for that. And you've got one more question, Councillor White. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question to help understand. Table 2 in the staff report summarises the submissions received, and it puts 5 houses in one group. I'm I'm just, could you explain why it's been done that way? Yeah, that's the question.
Acting Manager, Planning Services.
Thanks, and through you, presiding member. So those 5 houses, their value is mostly as a group. So taking 2 of them out of that, which I'm assuming you're alluding to, would effectively destroy that group. So yeah, so yeah, they have more like that group character rather than having the individual value.
Thank you. You're happy with that, Councillor White? Thank you. Great questions, everyone. We'll move on to, Councillor, sorry. O'Connor, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, I wanted to follow up the issue of constructing extensions at the rear of some of these properties, which has been raised by several owners as a particular concern. And I note that the individual sheets, assessments of the properties and the groups have been amended to reflect that the rear extensions are non-contributory. I guess I want to flip what Councillor De Vries was talking about in terms of extensions to heritage buildings need to be discernibly different. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no requirement for them to be dramatically different, is there?
Acting Manager, Planning Services.
Thanks, and through you, presiding member, that is correct.
Follow-up question? Thank you.
A second question. Several of the owners have already done quite a significant amount of work to their properties, particularly to the front facades. What incentives are therefore available left to them that the city provides that they may be interested in?
Acting Manager, Planning Services.
Thanks, and through you, presiding member. So the heritage grants are one incentive that's available. So that is mainly available to works that are visible from the street. So yeah, if those properties in particular are already significantly restored and repaired, then that may not be as attractive. There are also grants available to make the property structurally stable if there's any issues. Yeah, so there's some of those. Another one is if they do want to do extensions, as I mentioned before, there's the Heritage Advisory Service, which is available to assist with designing the additions. Yeah, that's. So, but yeah, if they have already made significant improvements and repairs to what's visible from the street, then that reduces the attractiveness of those incentives. But it is everything that's visible from the streetscape. So it could include a wide range of things that may be subject to a heritage grant.
Councillor De Vries.
Through you, presiding member, I do apologise, but I just wanted to clarify that the envelope of the 4 houses that you're referring to, but if one of those houses was only built 5 years ago, would that perhaps invalidate the whole concept of the envelope idea? Is there perhaps another reason? Would you like to take that on notice perhaps and come back to us? Because I just thought perhaps that is not the reason, and maybe there is another reason that the 4 houses were considered together. But I do understand, and that's what you need to clarify as well. If that 77 was just a new build, then clearly we could pull houses out and it would still be fine, possibly. Thank you.
Thank you. Acting Developer Management Services, are you comfortable to respond to that? No, so you'll take that on notice. Okay, thank you. Any further questions for C3? Councillor Johnson?
can lip read. She's saying something about my outfit. The scarf. She likes the scarf. Yeah.
She's got to go on mute.
Yeah.
The mic must be muted. Yeah.
Everybody poke at your ears at the same time. Okay. Everybody go this. We can't hear you.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson, we can't hear you. You might be on mute on your end.
Councillor Johnson, we can't hear you. You've been on mute. Do you want to try that again, please? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, just 2 seconds. My question is around people that want to do an amendment, not an amendment, sorry, do a renovation on their property that's heritage listed. You know, that you've said they can't do a replica. They can't, and I think some of the wording is mimic. They can't mimic. Where, you know, something has to be discernible about that renovation or extension, but it's not really clear about what's the sort of what level of discernibility. I know that's sort of been touched on a little bit. Councillor O'Connor asked a little bit around that, but for people that are about to have their houses put on a heritage list, that some of them do want to be able to do an extension that's in character with their precinct and with their home, where can they go to find out what would be acceptable for it to really tie in with the character and the look and be sympathetic, rather than, I mean, obviously they can do something very contemporary. It can stand out and juxtapose against the rest of the precinct, and that will be passed. But if they don't want that, if they want something that ties in and their neighbours want something that they do that ties in, where can they find out what can they do, and it will still be approved under delegated authority? Thanks.
Thank you. That's a good question. And I'll ask the Acting Manager of Planning Services to respond, please. Thank you.
Thanks, and through you, presiding member. So the first place to go to would be the city's coordinator of heritage and climate change, who is very competent and is very happy to have a chat with people in the first instance. And yes, I mentioned before, there's the city's Heritage Advisory Service for more formal heritage advice. So they're highly qualified heritage architects that we have on board that provide free advice to a owner of a heritage protected place. So that's really the avenues to go to.
Councillor Johnson, does that meet your needs?
Yeah, I guess I was hoping that people would be able to be pointed to a document, and rather than pointed to a couple of people that are staff that there seems to be, this could be quite subjective, I suspect. So I think it'd be great if we had a document that people could be pointed to, and it was a bit more specific, and it sort of outlined things that people can do that would comply. That would mean then that your neighbour can build have a building that they do an extension, and the roof line might, tie in with the rest of the roofs, but maybe the walls are discernibly not original. Something that was a document that people can get pointed to, I think would be useful. Do we have something like that?
Thank you. Junta?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, the document that guides that type of development is our local planning policy. I think it's 3.5. So that refers to development that's within on properties on the heritage list or within a heritage area.
Thank you.
Right. Are there any further questions for C3? All right. right, we'll move on to C4. Are there any questions for C? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Burns. C4. Okay, before you do, I'll just read out so that just that we're all on the one page with what C4 is. It's the adoption of fee and charges, the electric vehicle charges, which is on page 21. Councillor Burns, your question, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay. Thank you. I'm just trying to get my mind around this one. The fees more than the concept. Okay, I'll talk my way through this. We're doing everything we can to be carbon neutral ourselves, but by my calculations, we're going to sell, I'll say we're selling power, but in essence, we're selling kilometres. We're selling distance. So if you look at and you can tell me if my numbers are wrong, but if you look at the higher kilowatts, you can get yourself, if the car can do it, a maximum of 120 kilometres in an hour, and an hour of charging would cost you $27. In essence, by my calculation, the distance travelled is at a higher rate than if you were using fossil fuels. Now, at the 7.4 kilowatts per hour, it's far worse. Now, I do note that the document talks about this is meant to be a top-up, but at the same time, it's hard to see it as that because even at 7.4, you're going to get yourself, from what I can see, 10 kilometres in 15 minutes. So if the concept is just to get you home, you might want to just push the car. But on the other end, we know that we've got a lot of people that are looking for higher rates of consumption because they don't have facilities at all at home. And they can't even put them in because they're coming out of older apartment buildings, etc., like that. And they are using these stations, but still, if your car could do 400 kilometres, it'd take you 4 hours. And again, it still doesn't seem that we're being particularly proactive by pricing into electricity because it costs more than fossil fuels by these numbers. No, that'll be my starting point, and I'll see how we go, and I'll keep asking.
Acting CEO.
Thank you, Presiding Member. So I'll start answering and then I might throw it to Chris, the Acting Director for Technical Services, to add. So I guess the first thing to mention is that these charges and I guess the kilowatts available to them, that was specified through the grant that was made available for their installation. So that basically stipulated it had to be either 7 or 22 kilowatt charges. I take your point that there are higher charges out in the market, and you're quite right, there might be those users who would like to avail themselves of that so they can get more of a top up, as you say, and be able to travel further. But that's just not available on our current offering here. Obviously, it's not to preclude that being explored into the future. As for the price, we've tried to give a bit of a benchmarking of some other similar councils, just as far as the cost that's typically charged for these kind of facilities, and they're all in this kind of ballpark. And obviously the risk is, well, not the risk, I guess the consideration for council is whether you could subsidise that and I guess reduce the cost to try and incentivise it, or you can increase it and try and do more of a cost recovery or profit generation. Obviously that's, like any fees and charges, an option available to council. What we've tried to do and what Chris's team's tried to do is benchmark largely on what the industry is charging on a kilowatt basis for those locations. So Chris, was there anything else you think's worth mentioning?
Thank you, and through you. Look, there's not really a lot more to add to that one. What I might do, though, is actually just refer it to the Acting Manager of Compliance Services, Dean Bradshaw. Just in terms of those maths that Councillor Burns just quoted there, I just want to kind of really kind of just drill down that a little bit. Dean?
Yes, thank you, and through you. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So, Councillor Burns, I'm just not sure on that figure. So I think the fee proposed is 45 cents per kilowatt. The 22 kilowatt charges at Lords for most vehicles will only deliver 11 kilowatts per hour. So likely we would see a fee of about $4.95 per hour through the charges at Lords. And then the charges at the Roland Street car park, obviously the lower rated 7 kilowatt charges. So they're going to be running at about approximately $3.15 per hour. So for the very few vehicles which could maximise the 22 kilowatts of the Lords charges, that would still be about $9.90 per hour, giving them a full 22 kilowatts. And I think most electric vehicles, 22 kilowatts would be approaching maybe a quarter to a third of the capacity of the battery. So that would actually still be quite a high charge rate, or let's say charge delivery rather than rate, not to confuse it with the fee.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
It's 45 cents a whatever.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear Councillor Burns.
Look, Dean, I'm just apologising. My maths was incorrect. I'll accept yours. Okay. So, did you hear me? I said my mathematics was incorrect. Okay. I apologise. Thanks.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. Good exchange. And I'll go to you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, and through you. You're using the Charge Hub application for this billing. How did we arrive at choosing that, and what sort of alternatives were considered?
Acting Director of Technical Services.
Thank you, and through you. We, Compliance Services, is essentially solely responsible for determining the charge. Determining the vendor was already decided before we took this on board. I'm not too sure if the acting CEO has any other further information about it, but certainly that was already had been decided before we came on board.
So I think we might have to take that notice and get back with a bit more information, because I think it's a service we've previously used elsewhere. So I think this is a continuation of that, but we'll come back to you and confirm.
Thank you. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. I wanted to know about nighttime parking arrangements in both of those car parks, because the premise is that people are having to pay the usual amount to stay in those bays, but it's often the case that parking is actually free in the evening. So I wondered if you could just clarify what would be the arrangements at night time.
Acting Director of Technical Services.
Thank you, and through you. You're right. Essentially, there'll be no charge for paid parking after 5 p.m. or on weekends. There will be a charge, obviously, for the use of the EV chargers. That's will be in place 24/7. But essentially, free parking remains unaffected. There'll be no requirement to purchase a parking session, for example, at Roland Street car station after 5 p.m. or on weekends, and there's no requirement to purchase parking sessions at Lords at the moment either.
A follow-up, Councillor Johnson?
O'Connor, but...
O'Connor, my apologies.
And a follow-up question, and apologies if it's already in there, but does that mean that after hours and on weekends, there's no requirement to leave after 3 hours?
Thank you, through you. Oh, sorry. There will be. So basically built into the model that we have, the user will start to pay considerably more after that 3 hours has elapsed, and that's done through the actual Charge Hub app. So it's not dissimilar to what other local governments do, whereby they'll put into place, like if you like, a penalty amount. So they can continue to charge afterwards, but it's just going to be a lot more costly. So I think we've proposed a 15-minute grace period after the 3 hours with $1 per minute penalty. Other local governments, for example, I think it's Netherlands, has in place a 5-minute grace period with a $2 per minute penalty in place. So there will still be a requirement to move the vehicle after those 3 hours. Otherwise, they'll be receiving a higher rate of charge, if you like.
Councillor Jones.
Sorry, does this mean that a non-electric vehicle could park in one of those bays overnight and block it from the use of anybody who wanted to do charging?
Chris.
Thank you. Through you. Look, our rangers are on duty, obviously, all weekends. They start, I believe it's around, I think it's 7:15, finish at 4 o'clock in the evening. Likewise, in the evenings, they finish at 6. So we'd had the ability to police those bays during those times. Outside of those times, unfortunately, we don't have that ability. So yes, it is possible that a non-EV could park in a EV bay and not receive a penalty at that point.
I'll just jump in there quickly. Does that sound like there's a case for further FTEs then with the city? No, I'll leave that one. Councillor White.
Thank you. I understand from the report that this is, of course, based on a grant provided by ARENA. I was a bit interested by the acting CEO's reference to the current offering. Did we ever decide as a council on this and what the offering is?
Acting CEO.
Thank you, and for you, presiding member. So I believe, if you may cast your mind back, about 1.5 years ago, there was a council resolution on both the transition of electric vehicles for our light fleet at the city, and also the acceptance of this grant monies. I don't know if at that stage it was specified that these were the type of charges that would be available, but it was definitely part of that resolution, the acceptance of the ARENA funding.
Thank you. At least for the Lords one, what are the sources of the energy for this? Is this part of our purchase of renewable energy?
Thank you, and for you, presiding member, yes, this is part of our new power purchasing agreement. So it is green energy, effectively, that we'll be sourcing for Lords. Yes.
Sorry, I should have asked, if you don't mind, not just for Lords, but for the other side as well?
I believe so, but I might have to double check that for you. I'm positive about Lords, but I'm not sure about the car park. I'd have to confirm that for you.
Sorry, just to add to that, I don't believe Roland Street car station is being fueled by that green energy. It's definitely through Lords, but not Roland Street car station.
Any further questions for C4? Councillor Powell.
Yeah, look, this is probably a fairly basic one, but why did we opt for top-up rather than allowing for a full charge? I mean, is it big? Well, I just asked. I'll just leave it the question at that for the start.
Acting Director, Technical Services.
Thank you, and through you, I might have to defer this one to our acting CEO as well. Unfortunately, the purchase of the EV chargers came before we jumped onto this project.
So just to maybe add more, I think where you're going with this, Councillor Powers, I think, did we consider extending the time allowed for EVs to exceed that of other people in the car parks, because both are 3 hours essentially. So I believe that was considered, but I think for consistency of enforcement, it was agreed that probably to keep those 3 hours. Does that sound about right, Chris?
Yeah, that's correct. What we didn't want to kind of muddy the waters a little bit by having I guess, confusing restrictions in one area. So we felt that kind of maintaining that 3-hour limit to both EV chargers was already in keeping with the restrictions in place in Lords and was reasonable enough to apply to Rawdon Street Car Station.
Right, I'll see if we can get to C5. Any questions for C5, please, which is the draft council plan, which is and going out for community consultation. It's on page 27. Thank you. Councillor De Vries.
Through you, presiding member, this is a question for the manager of governance and strategy. Look, I understand this is a really important community document and community consultation and feedback would be quite important. Obviously, there's a window of time for that. Are we going to send letters to the residents of Subiaco to inform them? Because often these things just get missed, and I think it's such a vital one. Is it possible for us to do it even if it's not the usual case? Thank you.
Thank you, through presiding member. So yes, we will be, as well as advertising this on our Have Your Say platform, we will also be, from the previous surveys that we received, so both through market and our previous consultation, we'll be sending directly through the email addresses that we have.
Any further questions? Councillor Powell.
Yeah, look, we're sending out for community consultation for feedback. How is that feedback going to be fed back into this document? And what sort of changes can or would be made to this document as it presents at the moment, as a result of community feedback?
Director Corporate Services.
Sure, thank you, through you, presiding member. As per consultation feedback received on any document, I guess it depends on, the nature of the feedback, and, it's up to council really what it considers it wants to include. So for a document of this nature, all of the submissions would be made available to council. We will have an elected members workshop prior to putting forward the final council plan for adoption as well, so that elected members have a direct opportunity to really consider the feedback received and consider what's worthy of incorporating based on whether it represents the objectives and the aspirations of the community, and that those haven't already been reflected in the document.
Any further questions on the council plan? Right, we'll move along to C6, presiding member and deputy presiding members of council committees, page 31 of the document. Any questions, please? Okay, that looks like a no, so we'll move on to C7, which is the local government reform, the CEO KPIs and online registers, page 34 of the document. Any questions, please? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Deputy Mayor, there is, in the attachments, there's quite an extensive amount of information about this. Is the city's view very much in keeping with the Walga view on the proposed changes?
Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. Yeah, I'd say it would be in terms of the gist of it. Walga has identified previously that, for example, they're okay with the publishing of CEO KPIs, but not so much with the publishing of CEO performance reviews. That's probably the major item, which is the subject of this. Walga also calls out a number of technical issues around the drafting of some of the points around the online registers and whether the thresholds are appropriate, for example. So yeah, pretty much in accordance. There are probably a few little differences. So Walga hasn't picked up so much issues around procedural fairness in relation to the CEO probation period, I think. Those are some of the main issues that I can recall.
Councillor Powell?
Yeah, look, you've just mentioned the CEO's KPIs. It does appear that the staff report is even more robust than the Walga report in opposing that. Why is that?
Sure, and through you, presiding member. Look, I guess it's, all of the rationale is kind of outlined in the report, but it's essentially, there are very few executives in the public service or any that I'm aware of that have their actual individual performance reported on in the public domain. And so whether that is, quite detrimental in terms of being able to attract talent to CEO roles when they could just as easily go for a role in state government and not have that kind of over their heads. Also, some of the way that the performance criteria are to be laid out according to the draft regulations is quite challenging. So, for example, having to provide a black and white, was the KPI met or not, probably provokes just a little bit more imagine the elected member debate if, some were against a particular thing and some were for it, and it just makes the whole thing a little bit more political if you have to say yes or no, was the KPI met? Because often there's a quality dimension, for example, so something might have been met but not to a high standard, or it might have been met, it might take longer to implement, but at a higher standard. So there's just a range of contextualising factors when you do a performance review, and exposing all of that and creating a debate around it in the public domain is very unusual.
Councillor Powell.
Look, you just mentioned one of the things I was going to ask about. Are you aware of any state government department head that has their KPIs published, or any minister that is subjected to the same sort of scrutiny?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. I'm not, look, I haven't thoroughly researched the issue, but I'm not, and I think if somebody was, it would have surfaced through this whole consultation by now. There may well be, but it does seem to be highly unusual.
One more. The part of the reasoning for this, according to the state government, with these draft recommendations, is to cut red tape. But it would appear that, at least in regard to some of the registers, that it's just going to increase it. Is that the case, that really it's going to become far more of an administrative burden for local government?
Thank you. Through you, presiding member. Yes, absolutely, and that's definitely the sentiment that I've heard from many colleagues in local government. So, for example, recently at the Finance Professionals Conference, there was a great deal of questioning around why there was a need to report to this level of detail when we are already subject to substantially more scrutiny than other public departments. So, for example, we have to publish every single expense every month through our council reports, which is fine, and which we do, but then it's questionable why we have to publish, for example, then our contracts in the public domain as well. Because if you can imagine a supplier considering whether to deal with a local government and knowing that their pricing is going to be in the public domain, that's a fairly strong disincentive to provide a good price to a local government. So,
Councillor De Vries.
Through you, presiding member. Look, I just picked up on the psychological impact that this can have, and given that we have the Work Health and Safety Act 2020 with its accompanying regulations, including the psychosocial risks, this could create unintended consequences, is my question. And as a result of, greater scrutiny and then perhaps public, discussion that's quite negative, is it possible that this could lead to CEOs feeling that they are under psychological pressure and then test the act, and that act would have to come into place because there would be a clash really in terms of well-being in the workplace? Is that a possibility?
Thank you, and through your presiding member, yeah, absolutely. And look, I think that local government CEOs are already subject to quite a high degree of public scrutiny compared to a lot of public sector executives. So, for example, if you have a local newspaper that likes to focus on local politics, you're probably likely to be subject to it all of the time anyway. But it's just a matter of how does legislation and regulation support the psychosocial safety of our staff? How does it support and promote constructive relationships would be a question that I would have for the department, rather than putting in place more measures which are more likely to cause divide and disharmony.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Yeah, look, I've only got one final question. It's in regard to developer donations. Now, these are also covered, I think, in the new regulations. Those donations, is that things like works of public art, or is it, could it be cash in lieu of parking? What do those donations actually cover?
Director of Corporate Services.
Thanks through you, presiding member. Yeah, I'll take that one on notice. I think from recollection that it's more just around financial donations rather than contributions of things like public art, but I'll take that on notice just to be absolutely sure.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. As has been mentioned before, state government agencies don't have their Director General's KPIs. They may have agency KPIs, but not the individual Director General's KPIs in the public domain. Are you, or is anyone aware of a move by the state government to also introduce that for state government Director Generals and other heads of similar levels?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. No, I'm not aware of such a movement.
Any further questions?
Yes, if I could just ask a question.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Just publicly listed companies, CEOs, their contracts are in the public domain, aren't they? Is that correct? And their REM packages?
Director of Corporate Services.
Sure. Through you, presiding member. Typically their remuneration amounts are in the public domain, but not their performance, not their individual performance review results. So just like in the in local government, an organisation like a large public sector entity would typically have investor presentations where it would go through to its investors, what it achieved for the year and what it wants to achieve in the following year, and there'd be a bunch of press scrutiny of that. The analogy in local government would be the strategic community plan and corporate business plan, or the council plan. So actually having the personal KPIs of an individual in the public domain would be highly unusual.
It would just be their contract, and that would be it, not their KPIs and not the performance review. Is that correct?
So through you, presiding member, typically a CEO's contract wouldn't be in the public domain either. So I'd imagine there'd be some, potentially some quite sensitive things in some contracts, potentially not in others, but it would be highly unusual for an employee's employment contract to be in the public domain.
Sorry, through you, presiding member, I thought corporate, or any publicly listed company's CEO contract, not any employee, but the CEO contract was public. Oh, certainly the REM package.
So through your presiding member, the REM amount is typically disclosable in the annual report of the company, but not the contract, the contract with all of the clauses kind of outlining things like probation and termination conditions and allowances and all of that kind of stuff. That wouldn't be in the public domain, but the remuneration amount typically would, and that's the same for local government as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions, everyone. Any further questions? Right, I'll move on to C8, the final agenda item, financial statements and reports for the month ending 31 March 2025. Are there any questions, please? Okay, that being the case, I'll move to close the meeting, and I'm closing it now at 6:49.
Thanks.
Sorry, make
See
that
you, everyone.
6:40.